Hey folks, how are you? How's it going? Last night was embarrassing if you're an Inter Miami fan. And I'll tell you one thing, that there are many excuses that could be made. There are many excuses that were said by Tata Martino, that were given by Tata Martino in terms of what he needs, and 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 he needs. And my question is, well, why don't other teams make the same excuse? I mean, Columbus Crew could say, hey, I need this, I need that, but yet they were able to beat Tigre. Now, you get to a point where, fine, you need more players, but then the players that you've signed haven't produced. So is that your fault, or is it the players, or is it the team that just basically ends up satisfying every single whim you have? One thing is having a whim. Another thing is having a whim with the intent of fulfilling and filling a need that you have. Now, there's a new whim, if you will. Of course, last night, and understand who the source is in all of this, with Martin Lieberman, a very anti-Messi, a player, a journalist has always been against Leo Messi, a journalist that was one of those against the Argentine national team, a journalist that is not a very fond individual when it comes to Boca. Now, all that being said, understand where this comes from, because at the same time, he's bringing information that does have some veracity, some possible precision to it. Why do I say that? I put everything on the table here for you, okay? So you kind of get a better idea. For many years, Chiquito Romero has been. Some have looked at it as an obsession of Tata Martino's, kind of using a strong word so you can kind of get the point. But he's always been one of those that he's fancied as a goalkeeper. He's always wanted a Chiquito Romero in goal. Keep in mind, he's had a very good relationship with him. Keep in mind, he was his goalkeeper during the Copa America, as well as during both Copa Americas, I should say, in 2015 and 2016. But now he wants him, apparently. He wants him after the game. Where does that leave Drake Callender in all of this? Now, am I saying Drake Callender deserves to continue? I'm not saying yes, I'm not saying no. That's something that the fans have to decide. He didn't have a good... Look, no one at Inter Miami had a good performance. Maybe you could say, I don't know, maybe Messi was one of two or three that had one of the least worst performances. Least worst. Because I can't find one that, maybe Diego Gomez gets saved because he scored the goal. Maybe. But now, I digress. I'm talking about Tata Martino, all of a sudden wants Chiquito Romero, who will be 38 when the time comes, when he ends up coming to MLS, because he still has a contract with Boca until the end of the year. Romero also has an option to renew at Boca. They want him to remain at Boca, at least in the short term. Why is that? Because, Javi Garcia, the backup goalkeeper, is already 38, 39 years of age. He'll be retiring soon. But the player that's being looked at as a possible starting goalkeeper of the future, and he's shown a great deal of promise, while Chiquito Romero, no one's told anyone in the United States. Oh, by the way, Chiquito Romero's injured. Again. Leandro Bray. Leandro Bray, not only has he been solid, he was pretty good with Argentina at the Olympic qualifiers, and many are looking at the possibility of him being the starter in the Olympics. And many are looking at him, and I've mentioned if you listen to the Argentine broadcast, and I'm doing commentary on those, I always mention the fact that Leandro Bray is the goalkeeper of the future at Boca. So we have to put all our ducks in a row when it comes to finding this information. It's all this that's going on. As of right now, it's only a rumor. It's only a rumor. Could it happen? Maybe. Because there's one thing that kind of puts all this in limbo. The other day, Sergio Romero ends up giving an interview, and they asked him about his renewal at Boca. He said, well, I have to think about things. I have to talk to my family, have to see what we want to do, and see what the next steps are. So there is some like I said at first, there's some veracity to it. There is some precision to it in terms of the news. There is something to it. I'm not saying that it's a lie, that it's not true. Is it a rumor? Yes, it's a rumor as of right now. But could it happen? It could happen. But keep in mind, you're getting rid of a current U.S. national team goalkeeper and bringing in a former Argentine national team goalkeeper who, when he comes in, will end up being 38 years of age. So it ends up being precise because, of course, if you're not 35 and over, you can't play at Inter Miami, apparently. Or if you're not 22 and under, you can't play at Inter Miami. I don't know. It's all part of what's going on at the team. There's been lots of problems that Tata Martino talked about yesterday at MLS, but you can't really coach a team if they only practice 20, 30, 40 minutes a game, or a day, I should say. You can't have a 20, 30, 40 minute practice session and expect a team to play at the top level consistently, especially when you're playing against teams like Monterrey, like America, like those clubs. We'll throw in Tigres because they did advance, like Pachuca, who are currently amongst the top teams in the CONCACAF champions. So all the excuses that Tata Martino made, and of course he threw some daggers at the Mexican media. Say, oh yeah, what use is it for America to win the CONCACAF champions if they don't really offer anyone to the national team? That was more kind of like, I'm hurt, let me hurt you back kind of thing, especially after losing the way that Inter Miami did, because they were absolutely manhandled. Maybe the first 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes, Inter Miami played well. But after that, Monterrey had them in check. Monterrey was moving the ball around. Monterrey was, at one point in the match, it looked like actually Monterrey were toying with Inter Miami, and it was quite embarrassing to see. I mean, let's keep it real as well. Inter Miami beat themselves to a certain extent with the goals that were scored, the same mistakes that they make all the time, the same defensive lapses that they have all the time, the same problems that they have in the midfield where you have acres of space, and if you have a team that's halfway decent, they can take full advantage of this. And the halfway decent teams so far this year kind of have, although based on results, not many of them are halfway decent, and the halfway decent ones on up have. Thus, you see the problems that Inter Miami have when they're only playing against the top tier teams. When they start to face the bottom tier teams, well, that ends up being a completely different story, because yes, you can just simply beat down teams with Messi, Suarez, Alba, and Busquets. Now, all this being said, I do still believe that Inter Miami could trot their way to winning MLS. They could. They have a good shot of doing it. And at the same time, there will be a way. They'll try to find a way for Inter Miami to get into the Club World Cup now. And keep in mind that one of the qualifiers ends up being the champion of the league in the year prior to that. So there is a good possibility that Inter Miami wins MLS and they end up going into the Club World Cup. If not, there'll be something invented. Well, the winner of the League's Cup. And then Inter Miami puts all their eggs in that League's Cup basket, if you will. But whatever ends up being, that's where they're going to prioritize, 100%. But they got a reality of how good or not they are. I mean, although you could have known that if you had seen their preseason, if you had seen them against some of the better teams in MLS, how they played, and how, if they have any possibility of playing well offensively and not just counterattacking football, you knew that this team, it's sad to see at times. You also see a Messi that slowed down another gear. It's starting to be very apparent at times that Messi is slowing down, and there's nothing wrong with that. We're in the middle of April. He turns 37 in 2 months, so let's be real. Father Time is starting to take over, and maybe you start to see a new renaissance where he's more of a player that stays in the middle, stays more stationary, doesn't move around as much. And the little bit that he does, he still has that quick spurt but not the quick spurt that becomes an elongated gallop into the area. Because at that point, the younger players do end up catching up to him. He just has no one to partner with. When Suarez is kind of lumbering and trying to find his place. Now, keep in mind, the sacrifice that you have to make in order to make this function is have those players, have the Messis and have the Suarez a little bit higher up the pitch, and then, of course, defend with less players. Your numbers end up being compromised at times because the amount of time it takes for them to drop back and to go forward and to go into transition, that ends up being a problem. And as the season wears on, it will be a problem. Now, I've said this during Inter Miami broadcasts as well, that it will be an issue. And the question is not them at the end of the day. They're going to produce. Luis Suarez on one leg can score 20 goals in MLS. Messi, the way he's playing, should score 15, 20 and give 10, 15 assists, 20 assists. It's everybody else. That's the issue. It's everyone else that ends up being the big problem in all of this. It's the players that come in after that either lack Now, this is another thing that Tata Martino said last night that kind of, wait, you set up the bench to put all young players. You didn't make a substitution because then you say, well, no, the players that I had on the bench are too young to play, so I really didn't want to put them in a bad situation. So when are they going to be put in a bad situation? Because you only learn in bad situations. Now, I'm not saying burn them. I'm saying put them in situations where they have to be able to show the qualities that they have, whether they can now finally swim. You don't put them in a situation where they're bound to fail. They're not bound to fail when the game is over. The game is over. The game is over. Now you give them minutes so they can try and show what they have in adverse situations. Anyone that puts a 19, 20, 21-year-old or younger saying, oh, he sucks because he came in a match that was already done and he contributed little. Well, that little bit that he contributed is enough. That's where the unfairness of that statement by Tata Martino ends up being kind of a double statement when it comes to what he's saying. That he goes and says, well, I put in all young players in my bench, but then I'm not going to use my bench because they're all young. What sense does that make in the sense of this argument? What sense does it make in having them? Then fine, you know, I know that that's what there is based on injuries, but then also there's a fitness issue at Inter Miami. Like I said before, when you only run practices for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes at most, well, you're going to have to be bound to deal with certain injuries and certain recurrences of injuries. And that's something that this team is not fit yet. And it's crazy. I'm saying this in the middle of April, and they had a worldwide tour. They've already had a good portion of matches. They've already played in Conca Champions, and I'm still saying they're not fit. And it's noticeable at times. It's noticeable. But when you have, like I said, a team that only has a 20-minute practice, 30-minute practice at most, it ends up being very difficult for a team to finally find a certain level of fitness. Now, is it appeasement? Maybe. Is it a situation where, well, I don't want my veterans to get worn out? Maybe. But you have to have them fit. They still have to be fit enough to play, especially in these types. These are the matches that are the measuring stick for Inter Miami. It's not the matches where they win 4-0 against, well, they lost against Montreal, so that ends up, the matches that they won 4-0, the matches that they absolutely ran over the opposition, and they should score 3 or 4 goals. What's expected is expected. They've already met a certain level of expectation, maybe not even that. But when they play against the Monterreys, when they play against the Americas, when they play against Columbus Crew, LAFC, when they play against those teams, that ends up being the measuring stick for Inter. How do they play against those teams? That ends up being the big indicator of where Inter Miami is going. Like I said before, this is a team that could probably trot their way to 5th place and then all of a sudden be a bit more well-rested, I guess. And that's going to be a bigger question going on towards the end of the season when World Cup qualifiers. That is if Messi's still with the national team. That is if Suarez is still with the national team, which I doubt. That is, of course, if those things end up kind of mixing in, well, there'll be more rest time for them. So they'll be fresher going into the season, or maybe not. That all depends. But to me, Suarez is basically leaving after Copa America. Messi could be leaving after There's a lot of rumors, so I don't want to delve into each and every one of the rumors that have been talked about. Leo Messi, of course, I heard some in some broadcasts yesterday. Of course, there was a lot of streaming that was going on, and some networks had streaming, some didn't, and of course, one of them caught my attention. But that's been a lot of rumors that have been said throughout the past few months, and as those do end up kind of gaining some traction, one will end up talking about them a little bit more. But there's still a lot. I mean, Sergio Busquets looks slow, especially in the middle, and he has no support, which ends up being very preoccupying. Now, when Federico Redondo comes back, maybe there's some help there, and maybe that's where you start looking at this team. But again, when you start hearing rumors about a 38-year-old goalkeeper coming in to replace Drake Callender, as much as he's been an asset to Boca, do you still want a 38-year-old goalkeeper coming in that is okay at best using his feet, and also is a penalty shot stopper, is a goalkeeper that can make a lot of saves? Well, you kind of have one, don't you? Now, with the way he plays it with his feet, that's a different story. But then the same you could say about Sergio Romero. The only thing is that Tata loves him, which says a lot now about him and his relation with Drake Callender. Guys, I hope I can do more about this, but I end up kind of boring you. I know it's about 16 minutes, 17 minutes long, but I want to bring my point across because there's a lot of things to be able to express a little bit more, to give a little bit more in terms of what is going on and the rumors that have gone on and everything else that is kind of developed in terms of Inter Miami. So I'll talk to you soon.